before we begin to take a look at it from the context of our church and our parish and so on. And I came across a very interesting article that talked about what's called the upside down beauty of kingdom principles. And this is by, you can see his name at the bottom, this is an article by Ed Mellick. And I found it first because there was a group of young people who were using this principle as a part of their community outreach. So I thought this would be an interesting thing. And also, as Andy led us in prayer, I think, again, this gives us other context about really the importance of our reaching out to recognizing our community and then reaching out to the diverse members of the community that we are a part of. So if you follow along with me, and then I'll ask other people to read these. It starts by saying, Jesus taught that the kingdom of God is characterized by principles that are quite different from those of our world. If we could start over here, if you would read for me the first part.
You have to serve in order to lead and become last in order to be first. But among you it will be different. Those who are the greatest among you shall take the lowest rank, and the leader should be the servant.
Thank you. Hank?
You have to give up your life to find it. If you give up your life for me, you'll find it.
Karen?
You have to humble yourself to be honored. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God. And at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. Also, those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted.
Thank you. The next one?
You have to give in order to get. The rich should be rich and in good works and generous to those in need. Always be ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience true life.
Thank you. Robin?
You should love your enemies. You've heard the law that says, love your neighbor, and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. That way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. You are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect.
Thank you. Next.
Our power, success, and wealth come from God alone. Wealth and honor come from you alone, God. You rule over everything. Power and might are in your hand. At your discretion, people are made great and given strength.
Tina?
Golden rule. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of what all that is taught in the law and the prophets.
And then at the bottom it reads, can you imagine a world governed by these principles? I guess that's why they call them the upside down world, because it is different than what we perceive. It's hard to do when you consider all of the selfishness, self-glorification, arrogance, greed, and hatred in our world. But a society characterized by these kingdom principles is exactly what God has promised for those who love him. And Christians are supposed to provide a powerful forecast of the coming kingdom by the way they live and serve others in their lifetime. So I thought it was great that we have a contemporary piece that sort of reflects back on really our topic tonight, and that is community outreach. If we were to ask each of you, what does community outreach mean to you? We probably all have different versions of what it is that it means to us in particular. However, it's good that we take a look at the word community and look at it from the perspective of why we're here tonight. Again, we can look at it from the standpoint, first of all, of our church and our school. Those are prime factors in our lives. And we know, again, and I'll pull it up because I brought in the website because this is also a community outreach tool. How many of you have ever opened up our website? Good, oh, good. John would be very happy to be here tonight to see this. This is also a newly designed website, but there's so much in it, and it also really carries the history of our parishes being the first parish in Akron, Ohio. Really, our first church was down on Green Street. I was happy to learn about that from Father Dave Haliko this summer. It was a little wood structure. I always found it interesting that for an Irish parish, we have a French patron for our parish. And people often would say, well, well, how did that happen? And Father Dave gave the history of our church at a neighborhood celebration this past summer. And it was interesting because he described the fact, this was long before there were, a lot of people here in Ohio, long before we had a diocese. It was really from Cincinnati that the bishop came. But from Father Dave's talking about it, we recognize this is an Irish parish because of the reality that so many Irish immigrants came to build the canal that goes through our community. And it's not unusual then that our first wooden frame church down on Greene Street would be built so close to the canal. But Father Dave did tell the story that the bishop from Cincinnati came up to visit the parish. He was a French bishop, which is probably why our church is not called St. Patrick's or St. Clair's or some other good Irish saints. But again, the reality that, again, we have an international church and so on. But I found it very interesting, though, because he did describe that the French bishop was basically escorted out of town and went back to Cincinnati. Father Dave is a great, great source of lots of interesting things. The one thing I'd like to show you as we look at taking a look at our the history of our parish and so on. And again, if you ever have the chance to listen to Father Dave, you'd learn a lot about really even the modifications to our original church, how it was interrupted as it was being built during the Civil War and so on. So again, we're lucky we have the structure that we've had for so long that has such a history within our community. However, it's also important that we take a look at the mission of our parish as we're taking a look at what this community means to us. Our parish mission says, basically, we are a vibrant Catholic parish that fosters lifelong faith formation, evangelization, and community outreach centered around a daily relationship with Jesus Christ. It goes on to say we are a welcoming Catholic community called together by Jesus Christ and guided by the Holy Spirit to live and share the love of God in our parish and in our daily lives. So as we go back, we also recognize that over the course of history of our parish, a lot of things have changed. Again, thinking we were here before St. Mary's was here, St. Bernard's was here, the more downtown parishes. And I know I have particular interest because my last name is Zwisler, that again is think of Akron back then. If we put ourselves back into the reality that Stan Hewitt Hall was built in 1912 and that wasn't even a part of Akron. So the whole west side really, as we know it, past Highland Square, really didn't exist. So think about St. Vincent's being the west side parish that incorporated really all of the elements from here to Highland Square, to parts of our parish that still exist, the Delaware Ridgecrest area over by Stan Hewitt. But also remember that there are mansions built out in Fairlawn Heights that predate the formation of St. Sebastian's Parish or St. Hilary's. I recognize the importance of this, and I know that it probably made a big difference in the lives of the St. Vincent's Parish when my great uncle, Monsignor Zwisler, founded St. Sebastian's in 1928. He lived at St. Anthony's and over here on North Hill while it was being built. But again, think of how that changed our parish again as Akron continued to grow out. I'll also add another story that I heard about because again, St. Sebastian's is a very affluent parish. It always has been. I grew up on North Hill, and we called, even though it was my great uncle, we were not West Side Zwislers, we were North Side Zwislers, which we thought we were on the right side of the tracks. We didn't have to wear boots every day to school. And if you went to St. Sebastian's, that was a requirement when Monsignor was there. I'm sorry?
Yeah, if you didn't wear them, you had to stand by the angel.
Okay, see? So, but it was interesting too, because even as Akron continued to grow, obviously there was need for another parish. And it's interesting because, Monsignor was a great fundraiser. He built a beautiful church. The new church from the 1950s is just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. He was a great fundraiser, obviously cared greatly about his parish and so on. But then as growth continued, the bishop decided that there needed to be another parish. And this was long before, I think, Fairlawn even became a village, long before it became a city. And it's interesting because when the bishop went and talked to my great uncle about, we're going to carve out Fairlawn, Bath, there wasn't many other parishes going all the way to Medina at that time. But I am not surprised that the bishop probably placated him a bit, because I don't know if you know what Monsignor Zwisler's first name was. Hillary. And the new parish was called St. Hilary. Now, I'll tell you honestly, it's not named after my great uncle. But it does show again the fact that, we are still an anchor parish. We really serve a community that has long history, even though it's changed quite a bit. That's also why, again, we really take a look at our mission and really need to clarify, again, how our city has changed, our population of our parish has changed, our school's population has changed. We're lucky we still have a school. Many other parishes no longer have it. But we need to look at all of these things as a part of our community outreach. This has become more heightened as time has gone on, because in 2022, our Pope Francis, called for what is called a synod. How many of you have heard the word synod before? Good, so everybody knows that. Pass these out. We're not going to read over the results of our parish synod. However, I'm sharing this with you because this is a document from April of 2022, which is the highlights of the synod that took place in all the parishes in the Diocese of Cleveland. And I'll put that word up here. The synod took part, and I recognize people who were there, who took part and gave information back. But this was really the first step of our completing the synodal process, while all the other, or many of the other dioceses or parishes in our community also did this. The feedback that was gotten is all compiled in this document. And really there were several important factors that the participants gave feedback on. One was on race relations, knowing that racism is prevalent. We still have effects of, the generations of racism that have taken place and so on. So that was a really big factor. Another big factor was the growing concern related to our LGBTQ community. There are many of us as parishioners who have family members and friends who are members of the LGBTQ community. And again, as older Catholics, we recognize that our expectations for really our children, first of all, growing up Catholic, getting married, having their kids become Catholic and so on, is very challenging these days. I know even in my family, the big thing was really that, you have a big Catholic wedding, you make sure your child gets baptized, you go to church up until that point, then the next big step is, we have to have First Communion, and then the next step after that, if they're not in Catholic school, perhaps it's confirmation, which takes us through the sacraments and so on. But again, these are big challenges that we look for the community, but we also have to look to our families in terms of, how do we maintain our Catholic traditions and the value of our faith with all the changes that are going on in our society and so on. The step after the parish synod was that it went to the diocese, and all the parishes that put together their synod statements, those were compiled. Then the diocesan synod information then went to the U.S. Council of Bishops. It created one for our country, and then that also went to the one in Rome, which was this last fall. And we've seen some of the aspects through the leadership of Pope Francis in terms of discussing issues that are really important to our parishes, our families, our communities today. So again, a lot of this was really driven by our pastor, Father Norm, who really 2 years ago began to have discussions related to racial questions, and also how do we reach out to the LGBT community, especially knowing that many of us have family and friends who are members of that community who would still like to be a part of our church. If we step back for a minute, we can take a look at, this is under the get involved part. Let's see if, let's see if I can get back there. Well, I lost it. Oh, as you can tell, I'm really very accustomed to doing it. Andy, you want to come and take a look? Yes. Once we get back to the website, there we go. Let's see. There it goes. See if I must have hit something that took us back. There we go. And I just go to the website, good. And if we go get involved and go to parish organizations, there we go. Okay. Now, this is a list of all the organizations that we still have within our parish that really have been involved with community outreach for years, long before it became a term that we've adopted. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate your doing that for me. Again, if we look at really all of these things as being parts of community outreach, is how our church grounds and our cemetery look. Is that a community outreach piece? Yes, people look at us and so on. Even though our grounds have changed, the old high school is not there anymore. But we have a beautiful family center. We send messages. The very fact we have a website and that we have the ability to send flock notes. Hopefully you get those also as a text messages or an email and so on. So those are all wonderful things. We still have, again, a St. Vincent de Paul Society, St. Vincent de Paul Auxiliary, the Knights of Columbus, CYO, and so on. These are all traditional community outreach organizations, and they still play a really crucial role within our parish. They serve food, they're involved with the Church of Our Savior up on Crosby, with their pantry, also with clothing and things like that. So we're really very lucky, and we really do want to honor the fact that really these still exist. They strongly support our community and so on. If we think about it too, especially these days, thinking that our parish isn't as big as it used to be, and really our parish really right now goes pretty much around the block to Maple Street. We go up to Portage Path. That's when we start getting into St. Sebastian's area. We still have Ridgecrest, Delaware, that goes over by Stanhewitt. So we still have a big, big parish part. But truly one of the definitions of our local community, if you can stop for a minute, because when I went to high school here, our local community lived right over here on Crosby Street, Hall Street, Mapledale, and so on. I see lots of people, and also on Weber and other, very close community streets and so on. Our local community especially from Maple Street up to Rhodes Avenue, over to Exchange Street, that has changed dramatically. This is also, again, not only because it's not that much of a Catholic community as it used to be when people could walk to church and so on, but we also recognize that they are our closest neighbors. And again, that's why Father Norm, first of all, reached out, and I was divinely inspired to take the invitation. When he was contacted by a little organization called WHNO, which is West Hill Neighborhood Organization. This is a group of basically young professional people who live in our local community, from here to Rhodes Avenue and so on. We know Father Norm's a very busy man, so he was really looking for somebody who would go to their board meetings and then report back to how we as a parish can get involved. That has been a very, very positive relationship. This is a group that sponsors the Wonderfest, that we have ties to. Wonderfest takes place right over by the new fire station and so on, includes music and so on. So really, this is a group that's really focused on revitalizing this neighborhood, our most local neighborhood, which is really a good thing for our parish. We also recognize that one of the greatest challenges they face are the things that some of our organizations help with food, with shelter, and things of those nature, but also with the fact that most of that area now is owned by out-of-state landlords. So we also see deterioration of the housing and so on. But again, this is where Father Norm leads us to think about what else can we do with community outreach. As we continue down this road, we'll go next to, if I can do it. Oh, there we go. All right, here we go. There we go. Okay. Now, we've had for a while a number of what we call commissions. I know a lot of people here are already familiar very well with our commissions. Some of them, again, I think we had 9 or 10 commissions. Okay. And our parish council right now is looking at consolidating some of them. The size of our parish membership has gone down, obviously, because our neighborhoods have changed and so on. But this doesn't mean that we aren't still reaching out there and trying to work very well and open the door to not just our local community here, not just working with the Church of Our Savior or the House of Prayer for All People, which we did last Thanksgiving. So again, we're really being guided, I think, to look at more opportunities to increase the value of communication and outreach. Father Norm also helped us start, really now these have been going on for 2 years, through the Community Outreach Commission that was adopted by our parish council and accepted about a year and a half ago, that we would start monthly meetings for race relations. These go on the first Saturday of every month in this room. It's drawn a great audience. And this is also where a new learning came about called DEI. When we're talking about community outreach, it goes back to somewhat even like the readings that Andy read, also what I showed you on the chartreuse paper. Again, we're being called to sort of grow out of ourselves, to be humble and to really think about the other people that we're trying to serve. DEI stands for 3 terms: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, this is really a new term that's been put together that's also being very much discussed throughout our country. Certain aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion have brought about changes related to college admissions, acceptance of minority groups, things of that nature. Most of us are old enough to think back to the early 1960s when John F. Kennedy was running for president. Were there issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion being a Catholic? Yes. Because remember, even when he ran for president, of course, all of us who were Catholic were just in awe, that this might be possible. But the reality was that, and I'll say this carefully, that we recognized that we lived in a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant world, and that was the reality that we faced. In many ways, our parishes were like our ghettos. Our parish up on North Hill, St. Martha's, and remember, we had great other communities there, such as St. Anthony's, a Catholic church, St. Hedwig's, a Catholic church, Christ the King came along, and that had Hungarian roots. So again, it was, even for us being Catholics, we had different flavors of Catholics at the same time. And I remember thinking back then that, especially today, because we'd never look at it the same way, like a mixed marriage back then was when an Italian Catholic married an Irish Catholic. But it was true. So again, if we think about how the world really has changed so greatly in our lifetimes, again, that, even for being a Catholic, it's not so much anymore like what we grew up with. Again, even, and this is a story that goes back to what I told you about St. Sebastian's. When Monsignor was given the challenge of finding a place for the parish to be built, the Protestant congregations in the neighborhood put up a big furor. It was supposed to be, first of all, built in the big park that's there. It runs off of Mall and so on. But there was boycotts to that. So again, if you look at even the block that St. Sebastian's is built on, it's a pretty little block right across from Forest Lodge. Yes, the parking is not a good situation, obviously, there. But it shows the reality, too, of look how much the world has changed. And really how, the whole value of diversity, equity, and inclusion has impacted us as Catholics. We are not a minority religion. I mean, there are many other religions and so on, but I think this is the key element about this, is that again, over the course of time, especially with our modern day technology like websites and things like that again, this is a time for us to continue our growth and really probably to be more like the message that we receive from Jesus. The messages that we've talked about and sung about tonight. Again, about how do we really look at everybody else in the world as being a part of the great rainbow of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, we also have had, through our two discussion groups, the Black and White group meets the first Saturday of the month, the LGBT group meets the second Saturday of the month. Our WHNO meetings are also on a Thursday night every month. So again, it's a great thing to see all of these things going on, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's easy to think about this from the standpoint of how we learned this from a facilitator who came in and worked with our Black and White group first. Her name's Crystal Jones. She's a wonderful facilitator. She has been trained in DEI, so she's just really good at how she puts it all together and makes it understandable. But again, the reality of this, though, is it's as simply put as possible. It's like thinking about there's a dance. Diversity would mean that everybody gets invited to the dance, regardless of any of the factors that would have been possible. Equity means that everybody is invited equally. And the best part is in inclusion meant you got to the dance and you danced. So that is really the most simple way to put it, but this is what we're faced with DEI from both a racial diversity, equity, and inclusion factor, and also with our LGBTQ community. We continue to invite other people to come in. It's wonderful that it's posted in our bulletin every week when we have our Saturday meetings. We're also sponsoring book studies. The Black and White group used, I don't know if you've heard of this book before. It's been around for a little bit, White Fragility by an author named Robin DiAngelo. This was the book that we decided, and we completed this book study last summer through about September. This really gives you the reality of the racial history of our country. Robin DiAngelo is a PhD person who works with DEI with colleges, businesses, and so on. So she's very much, but look how intriguing the title is. It's called White Fragility. And it's basically, I think one of the best parts of it is that it really puts out in common terms, understandable terms, that it really starts with a kernel of prejudice that festers in a person, and that prejudice then turns out to be discrimination. And then finally it becomes racism. And we recognize that this is still something being talked about today, and will be continued to be talked about, especially as we go through.
It was significant too that she was white.
Oh, she is a white person.
And coming from that perspective,
Thank you.
I thought, wow, almost like me as a white person, I was mirroring everything. I think that's me.
But and Robin makes a very good point. It's one of those books that is best shared in discussion with other people, because we all bring our own perceptions to it and so on. And it's really in the talking and processing of it that is really very, very worthwhile. The other book, and this book study will be coming up, it's already being publicized in our bulletin. This is through our LGBTQ group. Father Martin is a Jesuit priest. He wrote this a little while back, but he's also very much added to the content of his whole feelings about really the bridges between that he's talking about is building a bridge between the Catholic Church and the LGBTQ community. He also was chosen by Pope Francis to be a part of the Synod in Rome. So I think that it was wonderful that a person of his stature and so on was included in the discussions in Rome that has led the Pope to make some other pronunciations that are more positive to the LGBTQ community. We also recognize that it's not only our church that is having a difficult time reaching out to the youth. It is really many, many, many churches. So again, hopefully by looking at this and taking the message about how the relationship can be improved and accepted, that would be a good thing. And again, there's information about that in the bulletin. again, when Andy asked me if I'd be willing, and I see our time's running out, I am glad I got to take you through a little bit about our website. If you have information or if you have any questions about it, it's a great source to go to, not just to find out about, when mass is on a certain day and things like that, but it's got a history of all our bulletins. Our bulletins also, I'm sorry?
I could never pull them up, I tried.
Really? I will say a prayer that it works. I know too. Often I go and I try it, but then I try to hit another area of it. Sometimes when you hit right where the bulletins are, you have to keep trying. And it could have been that they were working also on our new website. So that's awesome. Well, and we all have those shortcomings. But again, I think our parish is poised, especially as our parish council is looking at consolidating some of our commissions. We obviously are going to keep our buildings and grounds commission because again, our parish is a very attractive property. We also, again, remember the cost of operating a school is something that other parishes have sort of given up on. So it's really wonderful that not is really the fact that we have a school that's like 50% majority, 50% minority population is truly, from an educator standpoint, the ideal school setting for kids of today, so that they are accustomed to each other, they are used to each other, and that again, they grow together. We also look at the reality of the expense of having our cemetery. If you're ever coming down Merriman Road, you're looking straight at it. And then I also recognize the efforts that Father Crocker made, Father Yonner made, in making it again something that really most of West Akron gets to look at. And it's now beautifully maintained and again, an asset to our community. So as we're looking at all these different aspects of community outreach, it's interesting to see how our parish, perhaps because we're the first parish in Akron and we have a long history.
1837. Drink show me a Coke.
But I think again the reality is that again as we look at our mission and we are seeing again that we are all called to really be a welcoming parish, and seeing how our services go, how our masses go, how we have friendship weekends, how we have fish fries, how we have all sorts of things that continue to reach out in harmony with other people, regardless of whether they're Catholic or not, or they live right here or not. But again, that we're truly meeting the message that the good Lord has given us. And again, I know I find that I am highly blessed to be a member of our parish, and get to do this kind of work with other wonderful people that are also here tonight too. Thank you, Andy.
I didn't know there were anymore that there were parish boundaries. Are they actually enforced?
Good question.
There are boundaries
But
as far as where you go to church. That's not important. Well, you have to work it out, but it's pretty easy.
I wondered when my
Yeah, aren't you supposed to get permission from
The
parish
other.
you're in? Not anymore?
I think that's.
I don't think there's any penalty.
Can we have a special seating area for those of us who have
That's a great idea.
Any other questions? I know that I've been excited when I talk to other people about the outreach that we're doing because, particularly the Black, white, the LGBT. In those meetings, like I know the LGBT, we had like 28 people here, and it's a mix of people out from the community, not just from our parish. To me, that's a sign of life when you're able to actually interact and people are coming in to talk and we're engaged outside. That's really more what I think we should, in line with the gospel, what we should be doing. And it's oftentimes, it's really hard to do that. We're all so used to being, we're in our group, we know our people, I mean, it's a human thing too, but to get out and to break out and to kind of reach out to new areas.
What's the goal
Of
of the LGBT?
It's a discussion group. I mean, it's to promote dialogue.
It meets a couple of needs.
Part of the reason I ask,
Oh, no, it's a great question. Go ahead,
I have a-
finish.
I have a nephew who's gay, and from a Catholic family, and even my oldest son, we've had discussions about it. He's like, well, my son is mad at me because I don't think that, I don't agree with his lifestyle. And he's left the church. Well, not because, but because the church doesn't accept his lifestyle. And I pray a lot about it. I love him. I love his partner. But I don't know how to reconcile that with thinking what they're doing is wrong and without offending anybody.
Good. Yeah, one of the good things about both of our meetings that we conduct is that it's very candid, very open, and we have ground rules.
Yes.
But it's a discussion that is no holds barred, and we do address the issue of the divergence of opinions within the Catholic community. But we all realize that we're all children of God. And, so we approach it from that.
At the last meeting, Walt, there seemed to be little emphasis too on people who need support within their families. Parents were coming.
Yes.
So if anything, at least to me, it's a place where people can be heard, get support, and they can discuss the challenges that they have with family members like yourself, who it's a sounding board for those people. And it's all part of that inclusiveness, just listening to people's stories. If anything comes of it, I think it's worthwhile just for that. Like almost like a grief group, people come and speak their hurt, and that's important. But as Jim said, there are goals, there are things we're trying to do to be a more inclusive parish, a more welcoming parish to those folks and their families.
Good answer.
The stories are amazing. I mean, you talk about we have people who come and say, first somebody give me the sign of peace. Really? I'm thinking, are you kidding me? That's not our church. That's not how we should be. We're better than that. But there's some hurt out there. There's a lot of hurt.
Well, and I think to thank everybody for their input, it also, let's go back a little bit. Remember, we talked about how many members of our family are, I look at it from my nieces and nephews and my great nieces and nephews, that they don't go to church. And they aren't in a community that's already, been sort of ostracized from it. I think again, it as Robin said and Hank said, it gives you a safe place, first of all, to be able to tell your story And really, we have parents who have people come up to them and say, your child's going to hell. So I mean, it's as much therapeutic for parents as it is also for their children. And we do have a good number of representation from all the elements of LGBTQ. Really, one of the most profound, most recently, has been from the transgender population. They are the quietest element of the whole LGBTQ. And it's only been in the last couple of years where, again, and I have no idea what it would be like to go through life thinking I'm somebody else sexually, you know. But we recognize that in many ways, if we look at the spectrum of all that God has created, I was a teacher, so I recognize it mostly from the educational standpoint, the intelligence part. We already know we're not all the same weight, we're not all the same color, we're not all the same intelligence. Remember the good old days when there was a bell-shaped curve? They don't even have that anymore because, really that sort of put everybody into, wow, everybody's just mediocre in the middle, and then there's a smaller amount that lack intelligence or the ability to learn, and those who are much on the other end. But in our own lifetimes, remember, we had places like Weaver School that housed those that were on the low end of developmentally in educational aspects, or even behavioral or physical handicaps or mental handicaps. And it wasn't until we had IDEA that we recognized, no, we are not going to house them in other places, and they have the right to be around people of their own age. And think how that transformed public education. And that is the same way in many ways if we look at it from a spectrum standpoint. Perhaps this is all a part of God's design. How hard would it be to love your neighbor as yourself if they were all you?
Right, and also too, when you think about outreach geographically, this parish is right next to the quote unquote the gay community, right?
Highland Square.
I don't know that much about that. We people in Barton hear about that. Don't go down there and swear. Somebody might, gay you.
Yeah, really.
All right, you're much less safe in Barton than you're in.
Robin.
But yeah, and then you have the black community. You're right here. You're very a lot of black folks in this area.
There are.
The school has what?
50%. About that. Yeah.
So, that reaching out, you don't have to reach too far. They're kind of in the middle of the reach.
With that, thank you for the comments.
Yes,
We
thank
can
you.
continue the discussion during fellowship, but we're going to kind of bring some things to a close here. I was just reminded that, in the passage I read earlier, do nothing in selfishness or conceit, but in humility, count others better than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. With that, our closing song. I think the song fits. And then what we'll do, while he's getting set up, a couple quick announcements. Next month and the following month, there will be no Connect gathering. Next month, we have our parish mission on the 9th, 10th, 11th, 10th, 11th, 12th, which we'll be doing that. And then the following month, Saturday, April 20th, and Sunday, April 21st, we're going to be doing parish solemn Eucharistic devotions, and there'll be different things going on with that. It's a Saturday and a Sunday, and then we'll be back in May for this. But I just want to let you know we've got those things happening. All right.
I'd like to point out that that means we missed 50% of Connect meetings.
All right.
Final song is called The Servant Song, and pay really close attention to the words because it speaks of what
Grab my glasses so I
someone
can.
is asking God to let them serve him. Okay?
Me be your servant, let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey. We are travelers on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. I will hold the Christ light for you in the night time of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you, speak the peace you long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping. When you laugh, I'll laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony. Born of all we've known together, of Christ agony. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too.
Amen.
Amen.
So feel free to have refreshments. And thank you to our music, thank you to our speaker, and thank you to our refreshments. Yeah, we'll just leave the music on your chair and we'll collect that.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You said you were a nephew of Monsignor.
Monsignor, huh?
So is my mother-in-law,
Who's that?
Ruth Robbie Butler.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I was married to her son, Ed.
And do you have a son, Ed?
No.
Okay. Do you have a nephew?
No.
Okay.
I'm only the in-law.
Oh, okay. In the Butler family.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great big family.
Oh, it is. There were lots of
And
Kaufmans, the Butlers, the Swisslers, the Lobbies.
Yeah.
It was always interesting to sort of figure it out because there was a long history of that long family. And, I always tried to keep in mind, well, how did it go from the Kaufmans to the Butlers to the Swisslers to my Aunt Marie Kaufman, who was Monsignor's little sister?
Okay, I've heard of her.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Now, I don't think I ever met her, but because I just married into the family.
Oh, okay. She was,
around here.
well, in a way, she was very notorious. Oh, yes. She always had dedicated her life to Monsignor.
Yeah.
He was very lucky. He went to seminary at St. Charles Seminary in Baltimore, Maryland, for for the first 4 years. Then he went to Rome and went to the Pontifical Seminary there. So he was a well trained individual.
Was it a pontifical seminary, like not the North American?
No, this was
This was
in Rome.
Rome.
Yes, yes. And back in those days, I mean, that was probably 1915 and things of that nature. So transportation and so on. But she dedicated her life to Monsignor and was the house mother of the rectory as long as he was there.
Oh.
Thank you very much. And she was notorious for being mean to young priests. Oh yeah. When
well, I used to hear the stories of the rubber boots out.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why it was nice growing up on North Hill. North Hill was a wonderful place to grow up. It was always interesting being a Zwisler, because really there aren't that many Zwislers. Because it was Kaufman's, Butlers. In fact, I graduated.
And I guess and lobbies were on my mother-in-law's side.
Okay, but very, very close knit
they
too.
were, yeah.
And the lobbies were also friends of my mom. My mom was a NIST, N-I-S-T. She was one of 9, from North Hill. And my Uncle Joe, who was the youngest of the 9, was really best friends with one of the lobby boys. And it's a very sad story because my Uncle Joe, this was when I was a senior in high school. I'm still on mic. And I'm talking about Aunt Marie. I know. But no. Uncle Joe, forget which lobby it was. Young guy. With kids. Both of them firemen died in the same fire. Oh, yeah. I mean, I know how devastating it was to my family. But then also to have one of my best friends dying in the same fire. Both of them had literature. Those are things that tie families together.
Right.
What a horrible experience.
Well, I mean, it was a revelation to me to
You married into a big family with lots of traditions.
Yeah, the lobby, we have a family tree.
Yeah.
We all have a
Good.
lobby.
Good.
But that was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Really, and it took a long time for me to figure out how it all worked. But I was sort of glad to know that really the only were oh no were Monsignor, my grandfather, who was Irving Alfonso's son, and